Hello, good morning. It's morning for me, at least. I think for some of you, same there. Great. I'm not going to bore you with lots of technical details. I'm joking, of course. I'm going to bore you with lots of technical details. It's supposed to be a brief presentation on SIM technology, on SIM card technology. And before we get into it, I'm going to take you on a trip down memory lane without any visual aid. In the past 25 years or so, we've been moving through generations of mobile networks and, of course, through iterations of devices, of handheld devices, mobile phones, smartphones, cell phones. Thinking back to maybe 1997, 1998, with the advent of GSM networks, maybe you remember the paradigm, the usage paradigm between yourself, the user, and your handset. A small handset with a very simple user interaction, a very simple UI, like just dial the number, press the green button, and say hello to whoever was on the other line. And now, in 2020, we're moving towards 5G networks with literally mobile laptops in our pockets. I mean, my smartphone is seriously way powerful than my laptop as we speak. There is one thing that hasn't really changed in the past 25 years when it comes to this ecosystem. And that thing is the SIM card, the SIM technology. Of course, there have been some modifications, some additions to the standards, to the technology itself. But the underlying technology, the things that actually make SIM cards work, have been the same for the past 20 years. Now, moving past cell phones and SIM cards, think about the past 20 years. We've had great things like Windows XP and the band One Direction. Are there any fans in the house? I'm a great fan of, there you go. But SIM cards are still there. So, pushing forward to Simjacker. What is it? Why should we be worried about it, or should we be worried about it at all? In short, it's a vulnerability in the underlying technology of SIM cards. It has been weaponized. It has been used in some attacks, as far as we know. This presentation gathered some publicly available data from the likes of Advanced Mobile Security. They've published some great technical papers on this. It's been reported to GSMA, the GSM Association, and we are really waiting for some news from them as to how this can be fixed once and for all. And for the better part of it, it kind of has been patched. And I'll get to that in a second. This is a timeline of this specific attack, starting from 2015, when a first sighting occurred. And some people saw some weird traffic over SS7 networks, and those are the networks that are used for signaling and control of GSM networks, and for transmission of things like SMS messages. In 2017, somebody actually intercepted a first message, a first SMS message that was crafted in such a way that that required for the receiving terminal, the receiving handset, to do something that it wasn't supposed to do when receiving an SMS. In 2019, in June and September, adaptive mobile security researchers submitted the vulnerability to GSMA, and in September, some high-level info was released on this. It's not on this slide, but in October, I think, in mid-October or so, Advanced Mobile Security actually published a technical paper in some greater detail on this specific vulnerability. This is a SIM card. Well, this is not literally a SIM card. This is an LED screen. This is a graphic representation of a SIM card, a logical representation. A SIM card in itself, it's a Java applet on top of a smart card. This is what you now have in your cell phone. You have like this very underpowered, low-power computer, a smart card, running something like a 8090 series CPU, using 6 to 8 kilobytes of RAM. And then, on top of it, you have Java card, which is like Java's little backwards cousin. And on top of that, you have some apps. One of those apps, it's the SIM card app, the thing that actually allows you to authenticate in the network of your provider and to exchange information such as your cell phone number, your INCI, and SMS messages. Well, the SIM app leverages the use of an API, the SIM Toolkit API, to communicate to, well, the baseband of your cell phone, you know, to initiate calls and to answer calls and to send SMS messages, and to an user interface. You may have seen this in things like SIM card applications on your cell phone or on your smartphone. It has been used in Romania, as far as I can tell, by some operators in the past 20 years, around maybe mid-2000, 2005, up to until 2010. This was actually a thing. You could have recharged your prepaid SIM card account from a menu like this, from an interface like this. Well, over that Java card operating system, in your SIM app, in your SIM applets, we have two instances that have been used to weaponize this exploit, this vulnerability. You have a SAT browser, the SIM Alliance Toolkit browser, which is the thing that actually communicates to the UI of a phone and allows you to select things as download ringtones or pay the electricity bill. And you have the wireless internet browser. This is a different implementation. It's kind of the SAT browser on steroids. It actually has, it's an implementation of a WAP browser. Do you remember WAP? Yeah, that was great. That was a good thing. Of course, those two apps are vulnerable. Well, go figure. They are 20 years old or so. And they are vulnerable to an misconfiguration, actually. When sending an SMS over the air to a handset, to a SIM card, in this instance, the operator can actually push the information they are going to send to you, the end user, to different type of messages. You have administrative level messages, which can say to the cell phone, do this or that, dial a number, or I don't know, recharge the credit of your prepaid card with €5 or stuff like that. And then you have lower priority messages that can, of course, transport things like AT commands or even exploit the vulnerabilities that we're discussing. And these messages have a minimum security level. It's pretty much like everything in IP. The 3GPP standard that scrutinizes this and imposes a certain level of security for certain type of messages is not that clear as to the required minimum security level for two types of messages: high priority push and low priority push messages. And these are binary SMS messages that can be pushed, can be sent through a victim's cell phone, victim's number, and can get that number to do something, get that handset to do something. Because in the previous slide, I've shown you that these applets have direct access to the baseband of the cell phone. They simply forgot, or maybe they weren't thinking it that clearly when they imposed a minimum security level for the messages that can be pushed over the air. So just keep in mind that the low priority push messages and high priority push messages that can be sent over the air have no requirements as to a minimum security level. Basic things like some form of encryption, some form of authentication. If you are on the receiving end, anything can be sent over the air. Well, this slide pretty much summarizes what I've said in the past 2 minutes, but the thing that I'm going to insist on is that the SAT browser will accept push messages without any security level requirement. That's the technology. That's the underlying technology. That's the standard. The attack, the things that we saw in 2017 and then in 2018, I think. Well, one crafted SMS, it's sent over the air to, well, the victims. The SMS is a binary one, as opposed to your run-of-the-mill, your regular SMS message, which is pretty much text. I'm not going to go into encoding, but yes, you have like 140 bytes for text. This binary message is usually sent by mobile network operators, by cell phone operators, cellular network operators to their subscribers to do things like configure the cell phone when in roaming, to push some kind of configuration for some network changes in a geographical area. It's more on the administrative side. So you, a regular user of a cell phone, shouldn't be bothered with this. But these messages do exist. They have been used. They are in use, actually in use in some parts of the world. I'm going to get into that a bit later. And they are the principal vector for this attack. The message contains a payload of instructions crafted to interact with the SAT browser app and the SIM toolkit on that SIM card. Step 2, once the instructions are received on the SIM card, they are, of course, executed. And the instructions themselves can be pretty much everything. You can go high level and ask for things like cell ID, location information, right, and IME, the IME of the handset. Or you can go deeper. You can actually run AT commands, like on a modem. Do you remember modems, AT modems? Yeah, those are great. Ancient technology as well. Moreover, the wireless internet browser, the other implementation of the SAT browser, the more modern one, could be can be used to open a web page in the default browser of the phone or the web browser embedded on that SIM card. You can actually push commands such as dial a number or send an SMS message to a different number through these binary messages. And step 3, the binary SMS that contains the command for get location ID and get IME executes the payload and then instructs the cell phone to exfiltrate the information to a different number. So the attacker is on one side of the victim in the network, and the receiving number, which is probably owned by the attacker, is on the other side. So in this full cycle, you get from your unsuspecting victim, that just uses his or her cell phone, and the bad guys that send them binary messages through the cell phone, and then the cell phone itself will push the location and the EMI of the handset to another number. The actual attack that was observed in the wild focused on some regions in South America. I think it was Mexico and in some parts of Colombia and Peru. There have been over 10,000 subscribers that were monitored for location and handset information over a time span of maybe 2 years. There hasn't been any attribution as to who are the attackers, and I'm definitely not going to go into that. But there has been some forensic work. There have been some artifacts that remain post-attack because there's knowledge that the attackers actually used the SS7 network, so they were kind of inside the mobile operator network for that attack. And as far as we know, regarding that billion-dollar security versus the tiny pieces of plastic, the attackers tried a number of things. And I've broken down some of the things into 3 different scenarios. Location tracking. I believe that most of you are somehow, paying attention as to when their cell phones asks for location. You disable services like location services when they are not needed. You tell different applications not to track your precise gist data just for the hell of it. Well, that's one layer of security, of course. You might be using something like a VPN tunnel from your handset, your mobile device to your work network. You have strong encryption there because, I don't know, maybe it's a mobile device management policy. You might be using anti-tracking browsers and things like that. You might be, you know, like a black belt of cybersecurity when it comes to your mobile phone. All the boxes are ticked. You are doing everything right. There's nothing more that you can do to be safe and to ensure that hackers won't be hacking you, won't be tracking their location, your location, for example. And then, you know, somebody pushes an OTA, over-the-air, OTA, SMS message to your cell phone and gets your location ID, your cell ID, and your IME, your handset, and some timestamp. They can, you know, they can do something basic, such as mapping the cell ID data to GIS location on a map using something like OpenCell ID. They even have an API for that, and it's free. You don't have to pay like nothing. And then they can use something like OpenMap and the timestamps from the messages to visually track your location on a map. This is one scenario. As far as research goes, it has been used for the victims in South America. Another scenario, fraud. As I've said before, you can push something over the air and convince, you know, that cell phone of yours that it's a good idea to actually dial up a number, any number. Maybe a special rate number somewhere in a special rate number allowed place, you know. You know, those numbers, maybe we got some calls from various numbers in various islands from the Indian Ocean, and you call them back, and the mobile network operators calls you up and say, hey, you know, that's a special rate number, and you owe us much euros. Well, that's one application of this attack. And there's one thing that stands above else when it comes to this kind of attack, a Simjacker-based attack. Everything is done under the cover. There's no user interaction whatsoever. It's the way that the SIM card actually works. You can push that applet that allows your phone to dial a number, and you can instruct that card, because it's a Java card application, to work in a sort of a silent mode. You know, no user interaction whatsoever. And then you can go as far as deploy malware from a distance, from a safe distance. This is a bit far-fetched, but bear with me. You get your EMI from a mobile, from the SMS message. You get the handset vendor. You get the model. It's an educated guess from there on to search for something client-side, a vulnerability in one of the apps. Let's say it's an Android phone. Let's say it's an outdated Android phone. Let's say it's an outdated Android phone that the vendor doesn't actually want to update. Let's say it had some form of, it had some applications embedded by the mobile network operator. There's some client-side thing going on there. You craft your exploit, you put your exploit somewhere on the web, you send an SMS message to that phone number and instruct the wireless internet browser to open that web page and to execute the client-side thing. And then, you know, you have access in that phone number, in that cell phone. This is a bit far-fetched, but as far as I know, it has been tried. I'm not going to talk about the success of such an endeavor, but it's worth thinking about it. So this brings us to the last part of this presentation, and the question that's supposed to be open, and I'm going to give you both versions of the answer so we can close it. Should you be worried? No, you shouldn't. Not really. Here on the map, I've overlaid in red the countries where such an attack is possible, because in those countries there are mobile network operators that are using versions of SIM cards that are actually vulnerable to this. They use that wireless internet browser and that SAT browser, the technology, that application. Or they don't have any kind of binary SMS firewall in place between in their core network. Romania isn't one of those countries. I know that this is an international audience. I really hope you're not in the red there. But you shouldn't actually be worried about this as an attack. I don't think they are going to target any of us here. But what should really worry us is that that vulnerability was found in ancient technology. And this goes to prove that old things, you know, old things that are in use, I'm an old thing that's in use, are vulnerable to being obsolete. We don't pay great attention to technologies that are just there, are just sitting there. And SIM card, it's such a technology. And it's going to be there, it's going to be in your 5G phone, it's definitely going to be in your 5G phone, it's probably going to be in your 6G phone. It's still used for the same basic things that it has been used for the past 20 years or so. Authenticating the phone, the handset to the mobile network, and just, you know, pushing things like cell phone numbers and SMS messages. The technological depth, as some of us call it, it's not something that we can necessarily fix with software or with hardware or with binary SMS firewalls or with improved SIM cards from vendors that are not using those Java applets on top of that technology. It's something that requires constant attention. It's something that requires some of us going very deep in the technological layers that actually make up this entire technology field. And the telecommunication is just one such area where we should pay attention to this. So, in my belief, at least, yes, we should be worried to some extent. Not necessarily about simjacking. It's okay. But probably because of the thing that in maybe 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, somebody will be discussing about the next old thing that has been hacked in a conference just like this. So being a bit more proactive in the way we design security for obsolete technology, it's probably the best thing we can do to actually secure that technology. And finally, there are some acknowledgements for this. There's been lots of data from adaptive mobile security, from the technical papers. Great read. I really recommend you go through it if you are into this kind of old tech stuff. I think we have time for some questions. I don't know. So I'll grab
questions. 2 questions. We do have time for 2 questions. Yes. We have one here in the front.
Okay.
Of attacks also applying to the eSIM cards?
Yes. But yes, you know, like little, what do you call it? The asterisk. There are some vendors that are still using the Java applets I've mentioned before, the ones that are vulnerable. As far as I know, those vendors are being used in very small geographical areas by very small mobile network operators, you know? So on a larger scale, you shouldn't be worried about that. And eSIM, it's in fact just your average SIM card in a different form factor.
Okay.
Yes. So the next question.
Okay.
Okay, let's pick one. Let's pick someone here on this side this time. Can I have a mic here? It's good.
Yeah, thank you. As we all know today, more and more of us are using our mobile phones as a means for two-factor authentication on various platforms, which in our trust is something that might or is secure. My question is it really? Because recently there have been problems with SIM cloning, if I'm correct, which could allow overriding the legit two-factor authentication and deliver the power to the attacker to impersonate you and gain control on some platforms which require that second layer of authentication. We know that this is possible because it has been done before. My question is, how can it be possible, and how can we protect against it?
That's a good question, and this is going to be somewhat of a long answer. One of the use cases, one of the scenarios that have been tested regarding the Simjacker vulnerability and the Simjacker attack, but I've not presented that in this PowerPoint, is that of SMS spoofing. In this case, one attacker can use his own SMS centers, and that's like really old technology that sits somewhere in the core network of a mobile network, a network operator, and actually it forwards SMS messages from sender to destination. Using this, somebody could actually use their own SMS center and then push messages that are destined, that you should receive from your bank, like a second factor, to their own numbers, their own phone numbers. Given the complexity of such an endeavor to secure two-factor authentication over SMS, I think we should have a whole difference, an entire conference just on this. But we should start maybe from mobile security, from this. And I'm going to say it again, we are safe. This doesn't necessarily concern us, the Simjacker attack, and push forward to, using something better. It is my belief regarding two-factor over SMS that it should go into the technological debt pile and be used, as little as possible, and maybe used just for things that are not really important, or at least, can be considered not really important. For things that are critical, we should move past that. I think this could be a catch-all answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Let's give him a big round of applause.